This is a longer walkthrough of the practice problem for this unit. You should open up the Unit 2 practice problem start version. The start version doesn't have all the code in it, and then we'll walk through adding the code, and then you can do this as we go. So, what do we have here? We just have a simple countertop application where we're going to estimate a countertop cost. So we have some text boxes for the length and the width of the countertop. They're just txt width and length. We've got a radio button list here, and in that we have a collection of, it's under items. Let's see, under items I see collection, and I've got these different values I've entered in here. Each one has a text property and a value. Note the value changes, and that's the value here is the cost per square foot of our countertop. And so we'll be working today with both the text and the value properties. And we have a button, and when we click on this button, it's just button 1, click, and it doesn't do anything except it redirects us to page 2. So we've got two pages, page 1 and page 2. We're just looking at page 1. And page 2 is just a simple, says your countertop island estimate. Let's change that. All right. And then we just have a large multi-line text box called txt estimate, and its text mode is set to multi-line, so we can get a big view of it. When this page loads here, right now all we're grabbing that txt estimate box, and we're putting in your counter estimate in, and then putting a new line. We're using this environment.newLine to create a nice generic new line for that. So right now when we run this, oops, I shouldn't run the second page. That's one of the things you have to remember with web pages. Make sure you have opened the first page of our examples here that we're going to run. So stop this again and run this. And again, we could enter some size to our countertop, select a type here, hit get estimate. It opens up the second page, but doesn't pass any information to the second page. So let's now work on using the session variable to pass information to that second page. So let's stop this. So when we click on this button, before we go to the second page, we want to create a session variable and pass some information to it. So first we're just going to pass some information from the radio button. So there's a radio button list material. So if I look at this page, this radio button list, that's radio button list material. And I can get selected item. So if I'm going back here, I type in radio button list, I can get selected item. Get just dot selected. So there's a couple things: selected item, selected value. We'll use selected value later on. Selected item is just the name of the item selected, that text. And I'm going to store it as a string, or send it as a string into the session variable. So to store something in a session variable, we just say session with a capital S, and then we provide some key here, or tag. And then I'm just going to say material here, and this will store this information underneath that key or tag. So then on the other end, let's save this. On the other end, I can display some of this information. So to pull things out of the session variable, I just say session, again with capital S, and the same tag I use. So here I use the tag material or key. I have to use that same tag or key here. And I'm just going to declare a variable string, call it material. Now, one thing, when you send things in and out of the session, they lose their type. So you always have to cast things when you pull them out of session. So if I put in a string here, I converted this to a string, so this was a string variable going in, and then so I want a string variable, I want to cast that coming out. And then I can just print that, include that in my printout here. So I'm just going to add to my estimate, my text estimate field there. You select it and put the material in and add another new line. Okay, save this. Go back to my first page here and run this. I'm not going to enter values here for the length and width because we're not doing anything with those until we get to the assignment. So I'm just going to click on one of the types and hit Get Price Estimate. So it brings up the second page. I'm on page 2 here. Counter estimate, you selected granite. So again, when I was in page 1 and I hit the button, it pushed this the selected item granite into the session, and then when I got to the second page, it pulled it out of the session and displayed it here. So let's do the same thing for the next part, the value. So the value is hidden as a value field here. Oops, I have to stop this. Okay, bring up the code for this. Okay, so I'm also going to store in the session, so session bracket, and call this something else. Let's call this is the material cost, So again, I just have to use whatever tag I want. I just have to make sure the tag is in quotes. And make sure I use it on both ends with the exact same spelling and and capitalization. So now I'm going to go to my radio button, material again, and this time I'm going to get selected value and use that, and just get my semicolon here. Get rid of a couple of these lines. So again, I'm just pushing the selected value, so that'll be a number, and storing that into the session under this. So now in page 2, and often I just copy this so that I can get the spelling correctly. And I'll go to page 2, and then when I load the page again, I'm going to pull in a number. I'm going to make it a decimal number, and call it cost. And I'm going to grab that session variable. Okay, I think I've cleared this up. So, regarding session variable material cost, and I'm casting it a decimal. Now this is not going to work, and we'll talk about this why in just a sec. But you'd think this will work, so we'll try this out. I'm declaring a decimal cost, pulling it from the session variable using the same tag, and casting it as a decimal. So that all looks good. I'm also then going to display that. So I'm just going to add a material cost, which costs, and then add in my cost variables per square foot. So I'm just displaying the cost on that same line here. But now when I run this, we'll see an error. So here, click here to, we get a null reference exception error. Let's see. Oh, yeah, what I did is I was again on page 2 when I ran this. But now since I'm pulling things to a session without doing any checking, it's giving me some errors. So I've got to go back to page 1 and make sure I run it. So make sure you're on page 1. I'm going to close up some of these earlier runs. I'm not doing anything with the length or width yet. I'm just going to select one of these things, get price estimate. But again, here's where I get the actual error I was looking for: invalid cast handling. So I'm kind of cast what we actually pushed in here. Let me stop this. Is actually a string of the cost. So here, when we pushed into the material cost, this is actually a string. Even though we say selected value and it is a number, it pushes it in, it returns a string here. So it's actually pushing in a string. So here I'm taking a string and trying to cast it directly to a decimal. And so I can't cast a string directly to a decimal. I've got to do some sort of parsing here. So I've got to do more of a decimal parse here. So rather than casting it, I have to use my decimal type. Let's say decimal dot parse and select this value. Let's see, I think I have an extra parenthesis here, here. That looks good. but it's still giving me an error because, again, everything I pull out of the session has to be cast. Otherwise, it's a generic object type. So I have to cast this to a string, even because it is a string. Okay, so I cast it to a string. So I pull things out of the session, cast it to a string, and then parse that into a cost. Some people find it easier to do this on 2 lines, declare a string variable, and pull that out of the session, and then parse that. Or you could do like we did and do it all, just copy this all in here and put it inside the parse. So either way will work. This is a little clearer for some, especially when you're first learning this. We're grabbing the session variable, casting it to a string and storing that. And then we're taking that string and parsing that into a cost variable, and we're displaying that. Save this, switch back to page 1, run. Click on one of our values, hit estimate. You have selected laminate, which costs $6.50 per square foot, so that's working correctly. So for the assignment, you'll be going beyond this, where you'll be actually working with length and width values, passing those, pushing those into the session variables and pulling them out here. But there'll be another short video on the assignment to get you ready for that.